BLOCKCHANCE 2021.
Okay, so almost 8 years ago, at a conference on a very cold Munich winter day, I watched two guys raving about Bitcoin on a panel. And also this Mt. Gox Bitcoin price chart was shown. Okay, 8 years ago at a conference, so I saw these two guys on a panel, and this Bitcoin chart was shown. And I was so fascinated that I still remember staring at the chart from the audience. And then years and years later, I went back on YouTube and saw that the guys I actually saw back then were Jeremy Allaire of Circle and Barry Silbert of Digital Currency Group or Grayscale. And at the time, those two guys predicted basically all Bitcoin adoption developments that we have seen now over the last 1 year, including by Wall Street and also by payment providers. But they were not the only ones who had good advice. Also, this gentleman, who today has a CryptoPunk profile picture, and who had left a comment below the video. But to make a long story short, at the time, I didn't follow the advice. And in fact, I actually had forgotten about Bitcoin soon after. And so, there went my chance to hop on early on the crypto train, and I continued working on Web 2 topics. Web 2, Web 3, let's briefly recap the different waves of the internet. So the first wave of the internet, Web 1, started around in the 90s and was decentralized based on open source technology and also with limited static user experience on desktop. And the second wave of the internet took off around 2005 and was driven by mobile, social, and cloud technology and made the internet very interactive, but also very centralized. So few big tech companies grew into quasi-monopolistic platforms that today live off the monetization of our data. And I spent about a decade working in Web 2, rolling out apps, investing, and also partnering with the internet giants and feeling their insane market power. And now Web 3 is starting. And it is based mainly on blockchain and its decentral philosophy. And also now it's possible for users to own a piece of the internet via tokens. And seeing this and also knowing the massive change that the Web 2 already brought about in the traditional economy and also seeing the things that went into the wrong direction, Web 3 completely blew my mind. So there's a million things that fascinate me about Web 3, but I will focus today on these three simple points, and we'll use some examples from our coinIX deal flow and portfolio. So briefly, what is coinIX? coinIX, we are an investment company. We invest in liquid crypto assets, we invest in early token projects, and we invest in equity of blockchain startups. And we raise capital via listed shares on a traditional stock market. And here you see our team. We all share a big passion for crypto and blockchain, obviously, but we also have very diverse backgrounds in the traditional economy and in the crypto space. And this enables us to invest very heavily, diversify very heavily in terms of investment areas. So these are our investment areas. Roughly, you have the decentralized finance and the wider crypto space on the left-hand side, and you have the centralized traditional finance and business area on the left-hand side. And of course, all these areas are heavily impacted by blockchain innovation. And here are some of our portfolio companies. And the first observation that I can draw from investing in these areas is, of course, that blockchain innovation in the traditional world and in the crypto world are completely isolated worlds, completely different, very distinct business models are forming, and also completely different rules apply. So for instance, in a traditional financial industry, many use cases still center around the next level of digitalization. So many front ends in financial services have already been digitalized, but for back-end processes, it's a completely different story. And Cadea is one of our portfolio companies that now finally enables banks to also digitalize complex securitization processes. And also we see more and more traditional asset classes being digitalized. And then in decentralized finance, popular use cases are, of course, lending protocols, decentralized exchanges. An example is Sigma DEX here, which is a cross-chain DEX, and also a liquidity protocol. Yeah, and while for traditional, as of the blockchain innovation in the traditional finance space, still all the old rules apply, crypto has its complete own culture. Pitch decks are sometimes full of memes, and also due to the decentralized funding mechanism, and also all the money that has been made in crypto by early investors, projects are sometimes completely independent of classic funding instruments or old money. But this is changing. We see that those two worlds are beginning to converge. More and more talent is entering from the traditional world into crypto, and also more and more hybrid business models are emerging. So we see projects combining elements from the traditional financial industry and also from the decentralized finance industry together. And the convergence can also be felt in the wider crypto space. So our portfolio company, Niftify, for example, it's an NFT marketplace, and they are aiming to bring NFTs to make them accessible to mass markets, and they do this by, on the one hand, adding real-life utility to NFTs, for instance, as tickets to real-life events, or by adding non-crypto payment option and also focusing on abiding by regulations in the target markets. And on the other side of the spectrum, we see more and more token models being applied in the traditional business world. And Blocksmooth is a good example. It's a management buyout from Daimler Group. And they issued a blockchain platform that is connecting urban mobility providers such as car sharing, such as scooters or public transport. And they issue a token for payment, but also to incentivize the environmentally friendly use of transportation. And so we witnessed the start of Web3 elements spreading into the rest of the traditional economy. And it's just the very beginning. But let's remember the start of Web 2. As you might remember, in the beginning, mobile web and apps had very, very limited use cases and also, few users. But this dramatically changed with the advent of the iPhone, which was a quantum leap in user-friendliness as well. And so today, in all kinds of areas of business or of our lives, apps exist today. And the same will happen for Web3. We've heard many examples today how technology is advancing and so is user experience in Web3. And these Web3 elements will also spread in all kinds of areas. And we are today still at the very beginning here. And so it started with DeFi. For DeFi, there are very limited use cases at the moment that we have mental models for, so the space is quite crowded at the moment. But there are so many more opportunities for disruption and growth which we haven't even started to imagine. And why will be Web3 even bigger in potential than Web 2 was, which was already massive in terms of disruption? So Web3 is building on all previous technologies. So it's especially on Web 2 technology, but also it has the characteristics of Web 1. It's open source, open access, it's decentral. And this is a much more sustainable setup because the value that is created can be much more evenly distributed across stakeholders, and this is including users as well. And also many more people will have access to this value, because at the moment, previously underserved populations that are unbanked at the moment can be included financially and also economically with Web3. There's even entrepreneurs that make Web3 elements accessible via feature phones at the moment, so we're noticing a big trend here as well. And also, Web3 is offering alternative models. It's challenging more business models of industries than it was the case in Web2. And one example is AdHash, which is even challenging the big internet giants. So, for instance, AdHash is a company from the advertising space, and this market is quite broken at the moment. It's completely dominated by just 3 players here, and they are taking 70% of the online marketing budgets at the moment. And so AdHash is creating an alternative DLT platform that is not only cutting out the middleman, but also cutting costs for advertisers by up to 90%. And it's also privacy preserving because they don't use third-party cookies. And so this is a great example how Web3 offers a lot of elements to remedy things that went into the wrong direction in Web2. So to sum it up, I think we are extremely lucky today because we have the wisdom of the previous technological waves here of Web1 and Web2. We can infer the amazing potential of Web3, and Web3 is just starting. So we are all able to invest early on. And to close, I want to just quickly reference to a quote of a wise man that you might remember. Thank you.
BLOCKCHANCE 2021.